Daniel lived quietly on the colony world, far from the noise of the big cities. He was old now, his hair gray, his body tired, but inside him still burned something no alien could see, his love for music. Once, long ago on Earth, he had been a musician, filling halls with the sound of his guitar. But now Earth was far behind, and here on this strange world, no one cared about human music. The aliens thought humans were weak, their art useless, their songs nothing but noise compared to alien instruments. Daniel never argued. He just stayed silent and lived alone. That night, the aliens held a great feast. Their hall was bright with strange floating lights and filled with the smell of roasted alien beasts. Tall warriors with shining armor laughed and shouted, their voices echoing against the high stone walls. In one corner, musicians played sharp metallic sounds on instruments Daniel had never seen before. The sound was cold, more like machines than music. Still, the aliens clapped and cheered. Daniel sat at the edge of the hall, quiet, trying not to draw attention. He was only invited because he had once helped their village with repairs, nothing more. But the aliens had noticed him. A group of them pointed at him and laughed. "There is the human," one sneered. "The old one who says his kind used to play music." Another alien, tall with green skin and heavy horns, stepped forward carrying a large instrument, the Xenotone. It was shaped like a long curved harp, its strings glowing faint blue as if alive. No human had ever played it. It was said to need special alien touch, and even then only masters could make it sing. The horned alien placed the Xenotone in front of Daniel. "Play, human," he said mockingly. "Show us your earth art. Or is it true your kind only makes noise?" The hall exploded with laughter. Aliens slapped the tables, their teeth flashing as they jeered. Some even stomped their feet in rhythm, pretending to mimic clumsy music. Daniel's face stayed calm, but his hands trembled. He had never touched such an instrument. It looked alive, dangerous, mocking him with its glowing strings. He could feel their eyes burning into him, waiting for him to fail so they could laugh even harder. His heart pounded in his chest. He thought of standing up, leaving the hall, saving himself from shame. But then he remembered his wife's face, soft and smiling, holding his old guitar in their small house on Earth. He remembered how she would close her eyes when he played, as if the world stopped and only the music mattered. That memory gave him courage. Slowly, Daniel lifted the Xenotone. It was heavier than he expected, its frame cold and strange in his arms. The aliens laughed louder. "Careful, human, it might break your fragile bones," shouted one. Another yelled, "Do not snap the strings, old man." Their voices were sharp, cruel, like knives. Daniel ignored them. He closed his eyes and let his fingers hover above the glowing strings. He did not know how the Xenotone was meant to be played. But he knew music was not about rules. Music was about the heart, about soul, about telling a story without words. He thought of Earth, of the sunsets he would never see again, of the rain against his window, of holding his wife's hand during long nights. He let those memories guide him. His fingers touched the strings. The first sound was strange, almost broken, and the hall roared with laughter again. The aliens pointed and clapped as if the performance were a comedy. Daniel's face tightened, but he did not stop. His fingers moved again, slower this time, gentler, searching for a voice inside the instrument. The next sound that came was softer, smoother, and the laughter died a little. The Xenotone hummed with a glow that matched his touch, as if it were listening to him. Daniel felt it. The instrument was alive with possibility, but it needed something more than skill. It needed heart. He gave it his heart. The next string he played was deeper, carrying a note that echoed strangely across the hall. The noise of the feast dimmed. Conversation stopped. Glasses were left untouched. Even the children staring from the corner fell silent. The aliens leaned forward, their faces no longer mocking but uncertain. They had never heard the Xenotone sound like this before. Daniel still did not fully know what he was doing, but his soul remembered music. He played as if he held his old guitar again, blending Earth's lost melodies with the alien instrument's strange voice. The sound filled the hall with something different, warmth. Daniel's hands shook, but not from fear, from the weight of memories flowing through him. Every note was a memory of a world gone, every vibration a piece of his heart laid bare. He did not play for the aliens. He played for himself, for his wife, for Earth. But the aliens could not escape it. The sound was pulling them into a place they had never known. a place made of feeling. The hall, once full of cruel laughter, was now silent except for the trembling voice of the Xenotone under Daniel's hands. The mocking grins faded from alien faces. The air itself seemed to grow heavy, as if the music carried weight far greater than words. Some aliens exchanged looks, confused, almost nervous. They had wanted a joke, a show of weakness, but something else was happening. Daniel did not look at them. His eyes were closed, his body bent over the instrument, as if he was speaking to something far away. The glow of the strings pulsed brighter, following his touch, like the Xenotone had been waiting for him all along. The laughter was gone. Only silence remained. And in that silence, for the first time, the aliens began to feel something they had never felt before. Suspense gripped the hall like a hand around the throat, holding everyone captive as the human played on. At first, Daniel's hands were unsteady. His fingers moved across the glowing strings, but the sound that came out was broken and weak. The aliens burst into loud laughter again, clapping their hands and shouting insults. Some even stomped their feet against the stone floor, making fun of the rhythm. One tall alien shouted, "See! The human cannot even make a proper sound." Another leaned back with a cruel smile, saying, "This is the music of Earth? It is nothing but noise." Their laughter echoed in the hall like cruel bells. Daniel kept his eyes closed. He had faced ridicule before in his younger days, when some people had called his music worthless, but he had always believed that true music did not belong to critics. True music lived in the soul. Slowly, he took a deep breath and steadied his hands. He touched one string again, gently this time. The note that came out was smoother, clearer, carrying something delicate inside it. The laughter grew quieter, not because the aliens wanted it to, but because something in the sound forced them to pause. Daniel's fingers began to move with more confidence. He remembered the countless nights on Earth when he had sat by the window, his guitar resting on his lap, his wife listening quietly. He remembered the streets where children used to hum along when he played. Those memories returned to him now, like guiding hands, showing him how to shape the strange instrument into something familiar. He pressed the strings harder, then softer, feeling how the Xenotone responded to emotion rather than strength. It was not about force. It was about the story carried in the sound. The hall began to shift. The noise of laughter and jeering slowly faded. The warriors who had been slamming their cups against the table stopped moving. Their glowing eyes narrowed, listening. The sound that came from the Xenotone was different from what they had ever heard. Their own musicians usually played with skill and sharpness, but Daniel was not playing for skill. He was playing for feeling. Each note stretched out like a breath, slow and deep, carrying warmth into the cold air of the feast. The aliens looked at each other, unsure. The instrument was known for its harsh, sharp tones. But now, under Daniel's hands, it sounded soft, sorrowful, almost human. Some aliens shifted uncomfortably in their seats, as if they felt something they did not have words for. Daniel leaned closer to the strings. His face was calm now, his trembling gone. His fingers began to find a rhythm, slow at first, then stronger, like the steady beating of a heart. He had never been trained to play the Xenotone, but the music inside him did not need training. His hands, guided by instinct, began to create a melody that blended Earth's forgotten songs with the alien voice of the instrument. The first few notes seemed fragile, like a bird learning to fly. But then, like wings catching the wind, the melody rose higher. The strings glowed brighter, as if the Xenotone itself was waking up under his touch. A strange vibration filled the hall. Not just sound, but something that seemed to press against the hearts of everyone present. The mocking eyes softened. Some aliens tilted their heads, confused, trying to understand why they suddenly felt heavy inside. Daniel felt the change too. The laughter was gone now. Silence wrapped around him, but not the silence of mockery. This was the silence of attention. He could feel dozens of eyes locked on him, waiting, listening. His heart pounded harder, but it was not fear anymore. It was energy, the same energy he used to feel when an audience truly connected to his music. He allowed that energy to flow through him, letting his fingers dance across the glowing strings. A low note spread through the hall like rolling thunder, followed by a soft, high tone that carried like a whisper. Together, they wove a melody that touched something deep inside every ear that heard it. For the first time, the aliens felt the strange power of human music. Music that did not just impress the mind, but move the soul. One of the warriors, who had been laughing the loudest before, now sat frozen, his jaw tight. His hand, which had been holding a cup of wine, lowered slowly until it rested forgotten on the table. The sound reminded him of something long buried, though he could not name it. Another alien, a younger one, blinked quickly as if his eyes were stinging. He had never cried before, but something in the human's melody was pulling at him, forcing feelings he did not understand. Daniel did not open his eyes. He did not need to see their faces. He knew the music was reaching them because it was reaching him too. Each note carried pieces of his life, his childhood on Earth, the laughter of friends, the soft voice of his wife telling him not to stop playing. He let all those memories flow into the strings. The Xenotone answered him, humming and glowing brighter, filling the hall with waves of sound that felt alive. The aliens no longer spoke. No one dared laugh now. The air was heavy with something they had never known before, something only the human could give them. The feast was forgotten, the food left untouched, the lights dimmed compared to the glow of the instrument. Daniel's hands moved faster, the melody weaving higher and deeper, until it felt like the very walls of the hall were vibrating with sorrow and beauty. His heart beat in time with the music. His soul poured through every note. The mockery that had started the night was gone. Now only awe remained. When the final note of that passage rang out, the silence in the hall was so deep it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Every alien sat frozen, waiting for more, unable to speak, unable to laugh, their eyes fixed on the human who had turned mockery into wonder with nothing but sound. As Daniel's fingers moved across the glowing strings, the music began to change. The notes were no longer just sounds. They became something living, something that touched deep inside the hearts of those listening. The aliens sat still, their faces frozen, their proud eyes wide with confusion. They had expected clumsy noise, but instead, the melody was weaving into their minds like threads of light. The hall seemed to blur as the Xenotone's sound filled every corner. The notes carried warmth and sadness, a mixture so powerful it felt like memory itself. And then something strange happened. The aliens began to see pictures in their minds, visions rising like dreams they could not control. A warrior who had fought 100 battles suddenly saw his mother's face, though he had forgotten her long ago. A noblewoman saw a field of flowers she had never visited, but felt as if she had walked through it in another life. Even the servants, who had always bowed in silence, now looked up with tears in their eyes as if the music had given them courage to feel. Daniel did not see their faces. His eyes remained closed. He played not for them, but for the memories that haunted him. He saw his wife, standing in the sunlight on Earth, smiling at him as he strummed his guitar. He saw her sitting by the fire, her head resting on his shoulder, whispering that his music was her comfort in dark times. The ache of losing her filled his chest, but instead of breaking him, it poured into his hands, shaping the song. The Xenotone responded, its strings glowing brighter, humming with emotion. The aliens were helpless against it. They had prided themselves on being strong, on never showing weakness. But now the music was pulling apart the walls inside them. The proud warlord at the head of the table clenched his jaw, trying to stay firm, but his eyes watered. He quickly brushed a hand across his face, but the tear slipped down anyway. Another warrior lowered his head into his hands, shaking as memories of fallen comrades returned to him. The melody made them remember things they had buried, losses, regrets, moments of love they thought forgotten. The children in the hall were the most open. They stared wide-eyed, no shame in their tears. One small alien girl reached for her father's hand, whispering, "Why does it hurt, but also feel warm?" The father had no answer. He only held her hand tighter, afraid that if he let go, he would drown in the strange tide of emotion sweeping through him. Every note Daniel played was like a voice, speaking without words. It told of loneliness and love, of grief and hope. It was Earth's voice carried across stars, wrapped inside a human heart. The aliens had never known that sound could carry feeling. For them, music had been pride, discipline, and sharpness. But this was a storm and a sunrise together. It broke them apart and healed them at the same time. Daniel's mind was far away. He was standing in his small home on Earth again, hearing the rain fall against the window. His wife was beside him, closing her eyes to his song. He could almost smell the scent of her hair, hear her soft laugh when he played the wrong note. His heart ached so deeply that his hands trembled, yet he did not stop. The pain became the song, and the song became beauty. The aliens could not resist it. They felt as though the music was not just sound, but memory itself, pulling secrets from their souls. Some saw visions of lovers they had lost, others of childhood moments they had forgotten. One old alien, who had not cried since he was young, pressed his hand against his chest as tears streamed down his cheeks. "It is not possible," he whispered. "How can one human do this?" Daniel did not hear him. His fingers were moving faster now, weaving layers of sound that rose and fell like waves. The melody grew heavy, pulling everyone deeper into the storm of emotion. The aliens tried to resist, but their bodies betrayed them. Their throats tightened, their eyes burned, and one by one, they let go. Tears slid down alien faces, mixing with the glowing light of the Xenotone. The proud queen herself sat frozen on her throne. She had been prepared to laugh the loudest, to call the human foolish and weak. But now her hands gripped the arms of her chair, her chest rising and falling as if she were struggling to breathe. The music forced her to remember the brother she had lost in war, the one she had sworn never to think about again. She felt his voice in the song, as if he were alive for a moment, calling her name. Her eyes overflowed, and she did not even try to hide it. Daniel's melody climbed higher, filling the hall with brightness. It was sorrow and joy tangled together, the sound of a heart breaking and healing at once. The aliens had never believed humans were strong. They thought strength was in muscle, in weapons, in victory. But now they saw another kind of strength, a strength that could break through pride, pierce the soul, and bring even the hardest warrior to tears. Daniel finally let the note linger, long and trembling, like the final breath of someone saying goodbye. The hall was silent except for the sound of quiet sobs. No alien dared to laugh anymore. They were caught in the spell of his music, each one chained not by force, but by feeling. They had mocked him at first, but now every one of them was at his mercy. He opened his eyes at last. He saw their faces, wet with tears, eyes wide in shock, hearts laid bare. For a moment, he almost stopped playing, overwhelmed by the power of what was happening. But then he pressed the strings again, gently, lovingly, carrying them further into the song. What had started as mockery had become something else entirely. The Xenotone no longer felt alien in his hands. It felt like a bridge between worlds, an instrument that belonged to him, to Earth, and now to them. And as Daniel's music filled the hall, the aliens realized they were no longer listening to a human. They were listening to something far greater, the voice of the human soul itself. One by one, the aliens could no longer hold back. Their proud faces, once so full of laughter and mockery, now melted under the weight of Daniel's song. A warrior with scars across his cheek felt hot tears slide down his skin. He tried to hide it, wiping quickly, but more tears came, and his chest shook with emotions he had buried for years. Another alien woman, who had always looked cold and untouchable, now covered her mouth, her shoulders trembling as silent sobs escaped her. The sound of weeping began to spread across the hall like ripples in water. The Xenotone glowed brighter with every touch of Daniel's hands. The strings shimmered like living light, and the sound they carried was no longer just music. It was a storm, soft and powerful, crashing inside every listener's soul. The notes rose high and fell low, like the rise and fall of life itself. Aliens who had thought they were unshakable now clutched at their chests, their hearts aching with feelings they had never allowed themselves to feel. The sound cut through their armor, tore down the walls of pride, and left them vulnerable. Daniel still had his eyes closed, lost in the flow of memories. His wife's face, her smile, the way she had once whispered that his music gave her strength, all of it lived inside the song. His loneliness, his grief, his endless love poured into every note. He did not try to control the Xenotone anymore. He let it breathe with him, let it carry the truth of his soul. The instrument seemed to answer, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat in his hands. The hall, once loud and filled with cruel voices, had turned into something sacred. No one dared interrupt. Even the youngest children, who usually giggled at any distraction, sat still with wide eyes. One child wept openly, and his father, an alien who had never known how to comfort with words, pulled him close, letting the music say what he could not. The feast was forgotten. Plates of food sat untouched, cups of drink stood full. All that existed now was the music and the power it carried. At the high table, the alien warlord, known for his strength and merciless rule, shifted in his seat. His golden eyes were wet. He tried to sit tall, to show no weakness, but the song broke him from the inside. It reminded him of the battles he had fought, of the friends who had died in his arms, of the silence left behind after every war. His hand trembled against the table. When a single tear rolled down his cheek, no one mocked him. They were all too lost in their own pain and beauty. The queen herself rose slowly from her throne. She was a figure of power, dressed in silver robes, her crown glimmering under the soft glow of floating lights. She had been ready at the beginning to laugh the loudest, to humiliate the human in front of everyone. But now her eyes streamed with tears. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but no words came out. She placed her hand over her chest, as if the sound itself was pulling her heart apart. "Impossible," one of the elders whispered. His voice shook as he stared at Daniel. "No one has ever played the Xenotone like this." His words carried across the hall, and many nodded in silence. The Xenotone had always been cold, a proud alien instrument meant to show skill, not feeling. Yet under the human's touch, it had become something new. It was no longer a tool of pride. It was a voice of sorrow, of memory, of love. Daniel did not hear them. He was still inside the song, carrying it to its peak. His hands moved faster, then slower, like waves crashing and receding. The melody twisted through joy and pain, light and darkness, until the aliens could not tell if they were crying from sadness or from hope. It was both. It was everything. The hall shook with silence. It was not empty silence, but heavy, as if the walls themselves were listening. The music filled every stone, every breath, every heart. The mocking hall of feasting had transformed into a place of worship. No alien dared move. They sat frozen, their souls wide open, broken and healed at once. Daniel finally slowed the melody. His hands grew softer, the notes stretching longer, more fragile, as if the song was saying goodbye. The Xenotone glowed faintly now, its light dimming with each fading sound. When at last he struck the final note, it rang clear and pure, hanging in the air like the last star in a dark sky. And then there was nothing. The silence that followed was so complete it was painful. No one spoke, no one moved. The aliens stared at him with wet faces, their proud eyes red with tears. Some still trembled, their bodies unable to shake off the power of what they had felt. The queen herself lowered her head, her tears dripping onto her robes. The warlord sat frozen, his mighty shoulders slumped, as if the weight of years had suddenly fallen upon him. Daniel slowly opened his eyes. His chest rose and fell heavily, his face pale, his hands shaking from the release of so much memory. He looked at the hall. What he saw made his breath catch. The aliens who had mocked him, who had laughed at his weakness, now sat broken before him. Not by force, not by violence, but by music. The hall was no longer a place of cruelty. It had become something holy. The aliens looked at him as if he had spoken to their very souls, showing them a truth they had never known. For the first time, their proud faces bowed in silence, not to power, not to fear, but to the strength of a human heart. And Daniel, holding the dimly glowing Xenotone, understood that he had given them something they could never forget. Daniel let his hands rest on the Xenotone as the final note faded away. The hall was still wrapped in silence. Dozens of alien eyes stared at him, not with laughter or mockery, but with awe. The air was heavy, as if no one dared breathe too loudly, afraid the fragile beauty of the moment might break. He looked at their faces, and for the first time he saw not warriors, not nobles, not rulers. He saw souls laid bare. Tears clung to their cheeks, and their proud posture had melted into quiet humility. He set the Xenotone down carefully, the glowing strings dimming as if the instrument itself was tired after carrying such a song. He expected the laughter to return, expected someone to shout again that he was just a human, nothing more. But no one spoke. The sound of weeping still hung in the air, soft and real. Daniel straightened his back, feeling the weight of all those eyes. His heart pounded, not from fear now, but from the strange power he had just witnessed. He had not meant to break them. He had only played what was inside him. Then the queen, who had been silent the whole time, finally stood. Her silver robes shimmered as she walked down from her throne. Each step echoed through the hall, yet no one else moved. When she reached the floor, she stopped in front of Daniel. For a moment, her proud golden eyes looked into his tired human ones. She was known for her coldness, for her unshakable pride, yet her face was wet with tears. She raised her hand slowly and placed it over her chest. "I never understood your kind," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I thought humans weak. I thought you were creatures of flesh with no depth, no greatness. But tonight," she paused, struggling to find the words. "Tonight I have seen something stronger than any weapon or crown. You have shown us the soul of your people." The hall stirred as her words sank in. Aliens looked at each other, their proud expressions gone, their hearts still tangled in the human's melody. A warrior rose from his seat and placed his fist against his chest in respect. Another followed, and another, until the sound of fists striking armor filled the room like thunder. They were saluting him. Daniel blinked in surprise. He had never imagined such beings would honor him in this way. He stepped back slightly, shaking his head. "It was only music," he said, his voice quiet. But the elder alien at the side table spoke loudly, his deep voice carrying across the hall. "No, human. It was more than music. It was truth. It was memory. You reminded us of what we have forgotten, that strength is not only in war, but in feeling. You have broken us and given us something new." The aliens nodded, their heavy faces solemn. They had never bowed to a human before. They had conquered humans, ruled over them, mocked them. Yet now, in this hall, they found themselves respecting one. The music had done what politics and battles never could. It had created a bridge between species. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tight. He wanted to tell them he had only played for his wife, for Earth, for himself. But he knew it did not matter. The song no longer belonged to him. It belonged to all of them now. The aliens had felt it, carried it inside, and it had changed them. The queen raised her voice again, stronger now. "From this night forward, let it be known, humans are not weak. They are not soulless creatures. They carry within them something powerful, something beyond measure. This man has given us more than any warrior could." She turned back to Daniel and bowed her head, a gesture that made the hall gasp. The queen of an empire bowing to a human. It was something no one had ever seen. Daniel felt his chest tighten with emotion. He had lived quietly for years, forgotten and alone, carrying only his grief. Now he stood in front of beings who had mocked him hours ago, and they looked at him as if he were greater than kings. His hands trembled, and he whispered, almost to himself, "It was just a song." But the hall had already decided. The aliens began to chant softly, not in mockery, but in reverence. They repeated his name, their voices carrying through the chamber. "Daniel, Daniel, Daniel." It was a sound he never thought he would hear from alien mouths, filled with respect instead of scorn. He closed his eyes, letting the moment wash over him. He knew his wife would have smiled if she could have seen this. When the chanting quieted, the warlord stood. His voice was deep, steady, carrying power. "Human," he said, "you have done what none of us ever could. You have broken our pride and shown us beauty. For this, I offer you a place among us. Sit at our council, guide us, teach us. We will honor your kind as we honor you." The offer shocked the hall. Gasps echoed, but no one objected. They all felt the same truth. Daniel was no longer just a guest. He was a symbol. Daniel looked at the warlord, then at the queen, then at the faces of all the aliens watching him. A council seat, respect, honor, things he never dreamed of. But inside him, he felt the quiet weight of his wife's memory. He had not played for power or recognition. He had played because he could not live without music. He lowered his head slightly and said, "I am only a man. I do not seek to lead or rule. All I wanted was to share what was inside me." His words struck them even harder. A human who had just changed their hearts refused power. That humility made them respect him even more. The queen nodded slowly, her face soft. "Then at least stay among us. Teach us what you know. Teach our children what it means to feel." The hall erupted into agreement. They wanted to learn, to understand this human strength. They wanted to keep him close so that the music would never be lost. For the first time in history, the walls between alien and human cracked, not through war, but through song. Daniel looked at the Xenotone lying before him, its strings dim and quiet. He touched it gently, as if it were alive. He smiled faintly and whispered, "Maybe this is what she wanted me to do." Then he lifted his head and saw the eyes of everyone in the hall, waiting, hoping. For the first time since leaving Earth, Daniel did not feel alone. He felt like his music had found a new home, not only for him, but for all of humanity. Daniel stood quietly, his hands still trembling from the weight of the music he had released. The Xenotone lay across his lap, its glow faint now, as though it too had given everything it could. The alien stared at him with wide, wet eyes, unable to move, unable to speak. The silence was so deep it felt like the entire galaxy had paused. Then Daniel slowly lifted his gaze, and when he spoke, his voice was calm but filled with meaning. "Music is not just sound," he said. "It is memory. It is pain. It is joy. And it is love. It is the soul of being human." His words struck the aliens harder than any weapon. They were used to speeches filled with pride and power, promises of victory or strength. But this simple human, with his tired face and shaking hands, spoke of something they had never considered. The warriors in the room who had spilled blood for glory now felt suddenly small. The nobles who had ruled with pride now felt humbled. His voice carried truth, and it left them all silent. An elder with long silver horns stood up, leaning on his staff. His voice cracked as he said, "Teach us, human. Teach us how to feel this thing you call the soul. For too long we have lived in strength, in conquest, in silence. We do not know what you have shown us tonight." His plea carried through the hall, and many nodded, their eyes burning with hope. Daniel shook his head softly. "I cannot teach you as one teaches skill. It is not about fingers on strings or hands on keys. It is about giving yourself. When you play, you must put your heart into the sound. You must allow yourself to be weak, because weakness is where truth lives." The aliens listened, their proud faces lowered, ashamed of how much they had mocked him earlier. A warrior who had once shouted the loudest now stepped forward, his armor clinking as he knelt on one knee before Daniel. "I am a soldier. I know how to fight, but tonight your song made me see the faces of my brothers who died in battle. I had buried those memories. I had hidden them from myself. You forced me to remember, and I wept. If that is weakness, then I wish to learn it." Others followed. Nobles bowed their heads, children reached out their small hands, and even the queen herself lowered to one knee. Their voices rose in unity, not demanding, not mocking, but pleading, "Teach us." The hall, once filled with cruel laughter, now trembled with the sound of alien voices asking to be guided by a human. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had not asked for this. He had not come to prove himself, nor to lead anyone. He had only played because he could not keep the music locked inside any longer. Yet here they were, warriors and rulers, begging him to share what was most natural to him. He looked at the Xenotone again, its glow faint but steady, and he realized something. It was not the instrument that held the power. It was not even his hands. It was the humanity inside him, the grief, the love, the longing that had made the music alive. He looked at the crowd and said quietly, "I will share with you what I can, but understand this. What you felt tonight was not because of me alone. It was because you allowed yourselves to feel. That is the first step. Music is not magic. It is a mirror. It shows you who you are inside." The queen raised her head, her eyes red from tears. "Then let us learn, human. For too long, our people have forgotten how to look into that mirror." She took a deep breath and added words that shocked the hall. "From this day forward, no one shall mock the human spirit again. Let it be known that tonight, one human has humbled us all. He has given us a gift greater than victory." The aliens bowed their heads, their pride broken, their souls open. For the first time in their history, they did not bow to power or fear, but to wisdom born from pain and love. They begged him not to leave them, begged him to stay and show their children what music meant. For once, they were not rulers or warriors. They were students, waiting for a teacher. Daniel's eyes watered. He thought of his wife again, her gentle face, her laughter, her love. She had always told him that his music could heal, that it carried something bigger than himself. He had never believed it until now. Tonight, in this alien hall, he had seen her words come true. His music had crossed stars, broken barriers, and reached the hearts of those who had never known such feeling. The Xenotone in his lap shimmered faintly as if agreeing with him. Daniel smiled softly. "Then I will stay," he said. "Not as a master, not as a ruler, but as a man who shares what he carries inside. His words brought relief across the hall. Aliens nodded, some sobbing openly again, their voices whispering promises to learn, to listen, to change. That night, a strange thing happened. Warriors who had never shown weakness embraced one another. Children curled beside their parents, humming broken pieces of Daniel's melody. Nobles who had always stood apart sat together in silence, letting the sound replay in their minds. And for the first time, humans and aliens looked at each other not as enemies, not as rulers and subjects, but as equals, souls connected by one song. Daniel sat quietly among them, his hands resting on the Xenotone. He felt no triumph, no pride. He only felt peace. He had carried his grief for so long, believing it was a burden he bore alone. But tonight he had shared it, and in sharing, he had turned it into something greater. The aliens had given him back something he thought lost, a purpose. In the quiet hall, where only the soft sound of breathing remained, Daniel realized something even deeper. Music was not only for remembering the past, it was also for shaping the future. And as the aliens begged him to teach them, as they looked at him with eyes filled with respect, he knew the song of humanity was only just beginning to be heard among the stars. Daniel left the great hall slowly, his steps heavy but his heart strangely light. The Xenotone rested in his hands, its glow soft and gentle, like a living thing that had given all of itself but was still content. Behind him, the aliens remained silent, their tears still wet on their faces, their proud bodies bent under the weight of what they had felt. He stepped into the cool night air, and for the first time in years, he did not feel like a lonely old man. He felt like someone who had carried a flame into the dark, and that flame was now burning in others. The alien city stretched out before him, tall towers with glowing lights, streets busy with life even in the late hours. Normally, the noise and movement would have felt cold to him, but tonight he noticed something different. As he walked, the echoes of the song seemed to follow him, as if the notes still floated in the air, refusing to die. Aliens on the streets looked at him with strange eyes. Some bowed their heads, some touched their chests, some even whispered his name as he passed. He was no longer invisible. He was no longer mocked. He had become something they respected, something they wanted to carry with them. The next morning, the song had already spread. Alien musicians tried to copy what he had done. Their hands struck the Xenotone, trying to play with skill and speed, but the sound was empty. It was sharp, hollow, nothing like what Daniel had created. And then they remembered his words. Music was not skill, it was soul. Slowly, carefully, they began to try again, not with pride but with humility. For the first time, aliens sat quietly, letting themselves feel, and when they played, the notes trembled with truth. It was not the same as Daniel's song, but it was something new, something closer to what he had given them. Soon the melody traveled beyond the city. Caravans carried it to other villages. Soldiers brought it back from the capital. Children hummed it as they played in the streets. It became something larger than Daniel himself. Alien ships began to play recordings of the song during long journeys, the sound filling the metal halls with comfort. Soldiers before battle sat in silence, listening, their hearts calmer and heavier with memory, but also braver. Families sang it at night as a prayer, as if the melody protected them from the emptiness of the stars. Daniel heard the whispers. They called the song the soul of the human. They said it was proof that humans were not weak, that within their fragile bodies burned something greater than any strength of war. The queen herself ordered that the song be taught to the next generation, not as entertainment, but as a lesson, that even the smallest, most fragile being could carry power beyond measure. Daniel stayed in the city for a time, teaching what he could. He showed the children how to listen with their hearts, how to let music flow like water instead of forcing it. He told the warriors that to cry was not shame, but truth, and that truth made them stronger than pride ever could. He told the nobles that power was empty without feeling, that leadership meant carrying the pain of others as if it were your own. Everywhere he went, aliens listened. Not all understood at once, but slowly, the walls began to break. Yet Daniel never sought fame. When crowds gathered, he often stepped away. He was still the same man who had lived quietly on the edge of the colony, a man who missed his wife, a man who carried the weight of earth inside his chest. He often sat alone at night, looking at the stars, wondering if somewhere his song had reached her spirit, if she could hear him across the distance of death. Sometimes tears fell, but they were softer now, no longer only pain. They were a mix of sorrow and peace. One evening, a group of alien children came to him, carrying small instruments. Their hands were clumsy, their notes uneven, but their eyes were bright. They played the melody as best they could, their voices joining together in a rough chorus. It was broken, imperfect, but it was beautiful. Daniel smiled, and for the first time since leaving Earth, he laughed out loud. Not the laugh of mocking, not the laugh of bitterness, but the laugh of a man who finally saw hope. Years later, the song did not die. It grew stronger. It was sung in alien temples, played in alien homes, hummed by alien mothers to their children as lullabies, and always they remembered the human who had first played it, the man who turned mockery into tears, who showed them that weakness was strength and that music was more powerful than weapons. Daniel aged further, his hair white, his body weaker. But when he finally closed his eyes for the last time, the city around him played his melody. The Xenotone glowed once more in honor, and the air was filled with the sound of every alien voice singing together. They did not sing for themselves alone. They sang for him, for humanity, for the truth he had left behind. Long after he was gone, the song remained. It traveled across planets, through starships, across empires. Generations who had never met Daniel wept when they heard it. They whispered the same words again and again. Humans are weak in body, but strong in spirit. The melody had become more than a song. It had become a legacy. And so the humans' music lived forever, carried in alien hearts, shaping worlds, breaking barriers. They no longer saw humans as fragile or small. They saw them as something unshakable, something eternal. And whenever the song was played, even the proudest alien would pause, close their eyes and feel tears fall. Not from weakness, but from the gift of humanity's soul.